I invite the Registrar, Killian Brennan Roche, to read the minutes of the last private business meeting. Hear, hear.
Hello everyone. Nice to see such a massive turnout for our debate. Who would have thought that having a debate on Halloween night, not be Halloween themed, would have been such a massive turnout. It's great to see so many people come as ghosts, you know. If only somebody could have predicted this or warned our secretary, but alas. We have a costume competition afterwards in there. It should be fun. I think everyone that's here is dressed well, you know, like you all look good. So that should be grand and fun. And it's smaller in there, so we're going to look bigger, which is important as well. This is going to be, it'll be a fun debate. It's a good motion just on Halloween. But enjoy. Since I didn't put in that much effort to the first minute or the second one because I wasn't nervous, and I also didn't think there was going to be a big turnout, which I was right about. So, but this is great, and I hope you all enjoy. And I'll just talk more in the next one. Thank you.
Are there any objections to me signing these minutes as a true and accurate record of the last private business meeting? There being none, I shall duly sign. Mr. Treasurer, are there any fines?
There are no fines.
Madam Secretary, are there any reports to be read?
There are no reports to be read. Time for questions is now open.
Madam Secretary, are there any motions on notice?
There are no motions on notice.
Madam Secretary, are there any motions not on notice?
There are no motions not on notice. The time for questions is now closed.
This brings us on to general business of the Society. Are there any motions to be raised in general business? There being no further business, this private business meeting is adjourned. Our Secretary shall retire and return with the speakers for tonight's debate. I call this House to order, and I call on the Registrar to read the minutes of the last public business meeting.
Hello, it's me again. I'll start off by introducing our speakers. We have Amy Jennifer Kennedy, you know, the cutthroat cunt of the Hist. She's very mean in a good way, and she's probably one of my favourite people to watch debate. Then we have Jade Hajiriwa, right? Did I get it right? Close enough, which is good. She's cool. We have David Robbins, a professor of journalism from DCU, who specialises in media representations of climate change, and he's also really cool. I'm glad he's here. Then we have Andy Cullinan of the Hist. Always of the Hist. Eternally of the Hist. Then we have Ethan. Ethan is bisexual, so you think we would put a bit more effort into his costume. But anyway, and then we of course have the lovely Louise Cullen of Lawsock, who is just an all-around great person to be around. So I don't know. Cool. Since I usually do actually put in a bit of effort to my speeches and do I don't know, a bit. But it's Halloween and we're not having a Halloween themed debate, so I thought I'd make it a bit Halloweeny and read some scary stories. And one of my favourite things online is two-sentence horror. And I don't know how many people know about this, but it is a gem, honestly. Because sometimes you'll get some of the best things you'll ever hear, don't be scared of the monsters, just look for them. Look to your left, to your right, under your bed, behind your dresser, in your closet, but never look up. She hates being seen. Ooh, you know? Or I begin tucking him into bed and he tells me, Daddy, check for monsters under my bed. I look underneath for his amusement and see him, another him, under the bed, staring back at me, quivering and whispering, Daddy, there's something on my bed. Ooh, that's more than fucking 2 sentences as well, but that's like a solid one. But the best thing about two-sentence horror is when people try to do it and fail spectacularly. And it's hilarious. And sometimes you can tell that people were just trying to be funny. But for example, some of my favorite was, the devil promised me eternal youth in exchange for every one of my future children. He started sucking and never stopped. or, Mother, hello, I'm looking for friendly clowns for my son's birthday. Are you one of those? Murder clown, yeah. Hang on. I really need to piss. This wouldn't be a problem if not for the fact my stupid neighbour Darren super cleared my urethra shut in my sleep. Which is another one. And the final one I'll do, since these are terrible, is this is known as the IKEA incident. I decided to go on a tour of the IKEA factory. Little did I know I would find the creature that lays the IKEA meatballs. Anyway, so guys, it'll be a fun debate. I hope you enjoy. Thanks very much.
Are there any objections to me signing these minutes as a true and accurate record of the last public business meeting? There being none, I shall duly sign. Everyone, welcome to the University Philosophical Society. The motion that stands before the House tonight is this House regrets the rise of online activism. Standing orders are as follows. Speeches are a maximum of 7 minutes for student speakers and 10 minutes for guests. After the first minute and before the last minute of each speech, which will be signified by a bell, speakers from opposing sides and audience members are free to offer points of information. We encourage general audience participation during our debates. If you hear something you like, you can shout "hear, hear." If you hear something you don't like, you can shout "shame." We prioritize respect during our debates, and as a result, if anyone has any concerns about what is said tonight, our senior member of council, David Kelly, is contactable via smc@tcdphil.com. Alternatively, I'm contactable via president@tcdphil.com. Without further ado, I will introduce the speakers for tonight's debate. Speaking on proposition, we have Amy Jennifer Kennedy, Jade Najirwa, and Dr. David Robbins. Speaking on opposition, we have Andy Cullinan, Ethan McCarthy, and Louise Cullen. Hear, hear. Without further ado, I call on Amy to open the debate as a whole. Hear, hear.
That's going to amplify by the mic. Love that. Instagram did not radicalize me. Twitter did not teach me social and political realities. TikTok cannot and should not be the be-all and end-all of activism. I do not stand here opening this debate on the grounds that social media has done nothing good for activism. To do so would be disingenuous. I stand here to explain why social media can be a tool in a much larger process, but that it cannot be the extent and end of your activism. Before I start, though, in the spirit of being an outspoken activisty person, yes, I am the Students' Union, how did you guess? I want to say, what in the world are you doing? It's Halloween and you are at a Phil debate. There are 1,000,001 things happening in the city tonight, and the Phil is at least in the top 5 most boring. No hate, but full hate to Liam Corcoran, because that man fucked me around so many times. He kept switching which debate I was speaking in, and then changed my side for this specific motion 3 times. I wrote this in the full expectation that I would be delivering it to an empty chamber, so I wrote it for the GMB Ghost and Andy Cullinan alone. I usually try really hard not to be too serious when I'm speaking here, but regrettably I think that might be the only approach I have for this motion, so in absence of any other options, here's some important framing. Being first speaker, I am going to give a frame of what I consider to be social media activism, because I think that there's definitely some grey areas in this. Things like posting campaigns, the Black Square for example, infographics, yelling in someone's Twitter replies, or flooding Linda Doyle's comments, I think are fair game for this motion. I would not call calls to join physical protests that are shared on social media to be exclusively social media activism. These are likely publicised elsewhere, and the action itself is not social media focused. Similarly, things like email or telephone pickets I would not count, because the locus of these again is not on social media and the action is not on social media, etc., etc. You get the gist. Basically, if the action does not occur on social media platform, or if it is a publicisation of other activism efforts, like the IPSC posting about a physical occupation or something like, the focus is far enough removed that I feel they can be excluded. In terms of an actual argument then, what is the goal of activism? Why does social media activism fail to achieve this to any significant degree? And how does the lesser degree of social media activism not hurt involvement, awareness and participation? The goal of activism, broadly, is change. Yes, sure.
I think the motion's talking about online activism, so I do think it's fair for to encompass online social media activism.
Okay, in that case, look, phone pickets not so much. Email pickets, I'll let you take that. But that also is kind of included in the remit of this, because you can just kind of filter things out in like spam filters. So there's still the remit in like being able to filter out the stuff that you're receiving. So I don't think that really changes this that much. I primarily focus on social media activism because I feel that that is the one that is most prominent in this day and age. And if you're engaging in online activism, it is the easiest to access, and that means that a lot of the benefits that are coming from that are the ones that are social media activism. I think this is also fair. So, basically, the goal of activism is change. Change on a systemic level, on an institutional level, and on a cultural level. And at risk of sounding like I am repeating one of my sociology professors, because I kind of am, in order to achieve this change, populations must be informed, organised, and mobilised to an effective degree. Social media falls down on each of these 3 key hurdles, and online activism falls down on them similarly. Firstly, information. Online media lacks the checks and balances of traditional media. While you might only buy a right-leaning paper, you still see the headlines of the leftist equivalent on the newsstand. Also, there is broadly an incentive for a degree of truth and accountability through other information sources, a need for funding at some economic incentivization level. the need for truth on the level of journalistic integrity, and a need for public trust and buy-in to get substantial readership. On social media, on the internet, information can be uncited, unexplained, and shared beyond its original context without repercussions. The anonymity of social media platforms and the nature of social media algorithms means that disinformation cannot be traced back to the original source and can be proliferated and bought into through confirmation bias and the echo chambering of online spaces. Organisation of online activism fails to target effectively, furthermore. An excessive focus on things like awareness raising as opposed to tangible action means that posts with the same few facts or statistics are shared, as opposed to some form of higher coordination, so effective campaigns often do not even materialise. Even in the cases of seemingly effective online campaigns, for example, the popularity of the Black Square during the Black Lives Matter protest comes to mind, fails to be matched in attendance at similarly focused rallies and demonstrations because the social media aspect is not matched by a sufficient call to action. The lack of organisation and the distillation of clear campaigns and targets of social media activism means that the impact is always necessarily limited. A third of the three then, and crucially interlinked with this organisation, is the ability of social media to effectively mobilise people. I think there is a fair point to the accessibility of online activism. There's definitely some degree of it being able to reach people who might work in jobs that overlap with what meetings would otherwise be, or people who don't live in the most active regions of a campaign. This is not, however, facilitating the full participation of these people. The limitations of online mobilisation means that the functionality of activism is still limited, and these people are less likely to feel connected to a movement. Because if you never speak in person to the people who are in the movement that you are a part of, you are never going to feel that human connection to them because they're still going to be just a face on a screen, they're still going to be just words. If you are talking to them in person, this changes things. The proliferation of social media involvement as a full inclusion idea disincentivises movements for devising actually accessible frameworks in the first place. This means they are less likely to be organising, for example, multiple meetings that you can attend. It means they're less likely to be organising in such a way that people who, for example, are in wheelchairs can actually attend their protests. Furthermore, social media mobilising rarely materialises in effective activism due to the depersonalisation of issues. This is what I previously mentioned. Individual discussion with activists in person makes an issue really tangible and really humanises it. This increases your investment in it, which in turn increases the likelihood of you becoming active within that movement. The concentration of posts and competing accounts on the internet allows for these issues to dissolve into abstraction and become distant from the basic human concerns that ground our experiences as people. You can scroll past or click through without a second thought. You can search on Google and just go through the results. You can be in your emails and ignore the emails you are getting from the causes that matter. You are desensitized to the number of horrific images and stories you're seeing on your screen because you're seeing them every day and you do not have to look at them, so you will not because you do not want the impact of them on yourself. This means that social media and online donations are less. Online participation is lower and the transference of mobilization numbers is incomparable across social media activism when compared to other forms of the same in person. This means that when you're looking at online activism, it is simply not comparable in numbers or efficacy to any in-person activism efforts on the same front. I recognise that this is a wholly utilitarian approach. The idea of measuring the success of a movement in mobilised numbers or policy changes, in the case of some movements, a cultural shift is equally valuable. This is predominantly in modern identity movements and similar issues. This cultural shift is impaired by the same social media algorithms that I've already discussed. You see posts that reflect the views that you already agree with. So the people whose opinions need changing will likely never see any of the information on the internet you want them to see anyway. Add this to the factor of homophily when curating your online circles, you'll likely never interact with the online activism whatsoever because you are curating a feed that is what you agree with. When you're on the street, when you're in college, when you're in work, you are forced to see those people. If they're standing at the end of the street, if they're putting up posters in public, you have to interact with that, it is necessitated. I already have a reputation for being woke as hell, and I know that this is true to some degree. I am a woman, I am gay, I don't eat meat, dairy, or eggs. I just shop second-hand and repair everything I own until it's basically the ship of Theseus, and I will talk anyone's ear off about socialism. And this annoying character I've developed was not curated online. It was not crystallized in my Instagram stories or the shit music I post on TikTok. It was created by harsh confrontations with my constant unknowing. By the fact that I've had to tell people to my face that I need to do better, because I know that I do. It is because I was radicalized by the experiences I've had and by the experiences of my friends, my family, and my loved ones. That proximity and constant need for betterment, even when I know I'll never be done learning or fighting, it is what has brought me into activism, what keeps me working to do more and do better. Social media can be a launch pad, a stepping stone across the river of barriers to participation. But when it is allowed to be the total extent of activism, nothing will ever change. We cannot let that happen. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Amy for their very kind speech and call on Anne to open the case for side opposition.
Is that banging thing like done? Okay, great. This is kind of precarious. Let's hope that works. All right, Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Phil, and happy Halloween. It's fantastic to see all the outfits, the Joker is over there, we have an Italian over here. Back here we have Killian dressed as like a jogger, Joseph Stalin. As you can see, I'm dressed up as a young Fianna Fáil representative, which you might be thinking, hey Andy, don't you always dress up like a corporate sellout disguising conservative, elitist lifestyles beneath the thin veneer of wokeism? Well, as they always say, dress for the job you want, not the job you have, which at the moment is particularly pertinent because I'm unemployed. If anybody has anything, please hit me up. It's actually great not being a politician, though. The fact that this costume actually washes off means that on the one hand, I can do my usual Phil Chambers shtick of recycling jokes about ket balconies and compare Killian to a fascist dictator, and also never lose my job. Again, I don't even have one. But what are the Phil going to do, right? They're going to ban me from speaking in chamber? I mean, do me a favor. What are the University Times going to do? They're going to come along and cancel me? Nice try, bozos. The hist is still standing, unlike the Twin Towers. If you know, you know. This is getting a little bit too warm in here, though, so I think I might just kind of get started. All right, online activism. Yes, this is a shirt with my face on it, calling me a mass debater. Online activism. So this is the part where I'm going to do a little bit of debating. Very sorry. Prop do some Giga IQ BP framing, where they're like, online activism doesn't include organizing in-person stuff online. I think this is a little bit sus. If activists are online, raising awareness for real-world things, connecting to people, accumulating resources, raising money, I think that that's online activism. And I'll give you just an example, maybe to show why this might be the case. Think about if a bunch of BLM protesters started, making their way into the room right now. They started going around the room, passing out leaflets. They asked you, hey, do you want to go to my rally? They educated you about political issues. You probably think, wow, what an elaborate Halloween gimmick. That's phenomenal. Amazing. How did they get here? But also, you probably think if I asked you, this is activism. So when it goes online, and when instead it's instead of seeing them tell you about events, you're seeing it through sorts of posts. Instead of them asking you in person whether you should go to a rally, they're saying it online. I think this is still probably activism. With that said, 4 reasons why online activism is better than in-person activism. Or not better than in-person activism, actually in parallel to in-person activism is good. 1, it's safer than in-person activism. This is a really obvious argument, but I can't overstate its importance. It's really risky for Hong Kong protesters to stage demonstrations for their right to vote. They face the risk of persecution. You could be put in a registry or worse. It was only when they adopted the messenger app FireChat that the movement was able to soar to its heights in 2019. It's only when Indian activists who were trapped under the boot of Modi's ethno-nationalism started using WhatsApp to organize things, they were able to put an end to this sort of subjugation on their ability to mobilize. It was only through Facebook that the Iranian morality police were dragged before the eyes of the world following their murder of Masha Amini. Anonymity on a mass scale and information sharing in such a way the government can't take down every post is unique to online activism and has been the ladder through which oppressed groups the world over have climbed on an ascent towards equality. Second reason, online activism is more accessible than in-person activism. I don't propose to spend too much time on this. I think it's pretty non-controversial. It's easier to pick up your phone and post something on Instagram than it is to get up at the crack of dawn, go out to the Garden of Remembrance, put on a Palestinian flag, march to Kildare Street. It takes a lot of effort. But I don't want to say that this actually kills in-person activism. I actually think that online activism complements in-person activism and just makes it a lot easier. And the reason for this is because even though you're not maybe going out to that march, it's just easier to get there in the first place if it's the case that you're in the BDS group chat and people are able to coordinate with you. It's easier to conduct a meaningful encampment if you text someone to shove the groceries in through the gate for you. Think of the largest protests of all time, the 2017 women's marches, the 2020 BLM protests, the student union's PhD solidarity campaign. They are primarily organized online. It's a simple equation. Phones are cheap, they're an easy way to chat to people, they're an easy way to organize stuff, and if you can reach more people, you get more bodies involved, more voices in the chat, more ballots in the box. It's just very successful activism. This isn't even mentioning the accessibility benefits for people like disabled activists who can contribute remotely, people from low-income backgrounds who often are the most fucked over but also the least able to go to in-person demonstrations because it's just that if you're working then it's very hard, or if you have care responsibilities, instead you can engage online. And even for experienced activists who usually go in person week in, week out. I gotta tell you, I've been dating one of the coolest ones for 9 months sitting back there, and the amount of stuff that goes in is extraordinary. They're over there with the camera. Everybody say hi to Kira. I don't know, what is this? it's Valentine's Day. Okay, what's the point of this? Sometimes activists just get naturally tired. They're human. You don't have the energy to go out every single day. If you post online today, maybe you have the energy so that you can go out tomorrow, and that's just something which is more sustainable. I don't think the people who really care about activism and issues just decide they're never going to go out. They post on the Instagram on their way to the protest rather than doing it and deciding they won't go out at all. This is how it usually turns out. The third thing I want to say is that online activism facilitates international cooperation. Loads of activists in communities in the global south don't have developed charities or NGOs domestically. But international discussion and global activism allows young girls in Afghanistan to get involved in global feminist campaigns. It gives us a direct window into FGM in Kenya, critically, using the voices of people who actually know what they're talking about firsthand. This makes our solutions more accurate, our messages more powerful, and our relationships more meaningful. The last thing I want to say is that activism is just generally good. And now I want to just put back on my young Fianna Fáil outfit for a second, because I'm going to say something maybe a little bit right-wing, which is that we're in a bit of a liberal echo chamber inside of Trinity generally, right? Think about like the fact that we're kind of, I don't know, we might have a lot of opinions here which might be held by us but are divorced from the reality that other people find. And speaking of divorce, think about the referendum, right, earlier on this year. How many people across the campus hated the women in the home provision of the Constitution? How many thought that it was such a disgrace? And how many people would never have been able to vote to keep it inside of that Constitution? But when the poll numbers were released and I was at a debating competition, everyone was in dismay. But I find it very difficult to look to my left and look to my right and say the people next to me are stupid because they have a different opinion. I don't have anything better than these other people because I've read Kant, or like the other people around me have read Sylvia Plath, right? And look, if I'm the person literally with my face with a mass debater sign on it saying that you can't look and say you're better than people, I'm wearing a wanker sign on my chest, and I didn't even need the sign. You probably already got it once I started spewing this South Dublin diatribe the first minute I opened my mouth. What I'm saying essentially is that even if you think that opinions are unpalatable, people should have a right to express them, and it's much easier to express them using online activism than it is in person. The bottom line is this: online activism is generally good, it complements in-person activism, it allows for people to uniquely engage in activism who couldn't in any other way, and it's beneficial in and of itself. For all these reasons, thank you.
I'd like to thank Andy for their verified speech and call on Jay to pursue the case for his side proposition. Hear, hear.
First, I just want to shout out Killian. You just learned my name like 2 minutes ago. Thank you. You got it right. No one does that. Okay. Also, side note, sorry for some of the stuff in here. I didn't realize how empty the chamber was going to be. Not a bad thing. All right. So now, guys, I kind of have a confession to make. I, too, have posted those colorful infographics from Instagram with the new social dilemma of the week. I mean, you have to admit, they can be really well constructed and add a little spice to learning about things like, I don't know, the newest, hottest dictatorship on the block. But like, make it pink and sparkly, you know? But in all seriousness, we have to get to the boring bit and understand what online activism should do. Online activism is meant to mobilize the people and bring awareness to various atrocities that plague our daily lives through the power of the internet. Sounds great, right? Like, there's a way to bring people together from all over the world for a specific cause. Shouldn't our problems be getting knocked down left and right, and shouldn't we be living in a Marxist utopia by now, any day by now? Sadly, no. Marx has not had the chance to be revived from the dead to help us as our zombie messiah. And also, guys, happy Halloween! Even though the Phil isn't doing a Halloween-themed motion this week, that shouldn't let us from not embracing this holiday. Anyways, back to the topic at hand. We think of what do we think of when we think of online activism? Infographics, informative TikToks, those infamous black squares from 2020? No, but like actually, how many of you posted those squares? And how many of you still have those squares up? Though this is the performance of it all. Does real change actually get done by simply showing solidarity? It is a good thing to show you care, yes, but if the point of showing solidarity is to lead to larger movements that gets change done, then doesn't it seem to fall a bit short? We should be seeing more large and destructive movements from what we see online. And I'm not talking about things like sending mass emails to emails or letters to your local politicians, or sharing someone's petition, which I understand are still forms of activism, but tend to not be as persistent and loud. I'm talking about social change, French Revolution style. Because I hate to admit it, guys, but you can turn off the internet, but you can't turn off a protest blocking you in traffic. And that's another thing. Yes, protests can be organized from online forums, sure.
Why can't the French revolutionaries and traffic stoppers do that and then also post on social media?
Well, I'm getting to something like this. But, you know, you can have online forums and, you know, but it's not a consistent thing. It's something that, like, you know, you just, you show solidarity, but you can't actually, like, if you want real change, you have to be loud, and you also have to show that, like, anyways, whatever. But do you guys think the French Revolution was successful by chopping off one guy's head? Well, I mean, in the end, kind of, but the point still stands. Real change comes from not only physical action, but also consistent and persistent action. For example, my friend once told me about how she was on her city's council youth, where they were discussing stereotyping, to which she called out her judo instructor and how he said that any guy who does dance is gay and all girls who do sports are lesbians. To which I have to say, has he not seen High School Musical? That is the heterosexual roles reverse storyline that he was missing. Except for Sharpay and her little brother, though. They were honestly queer icons. Though back to my friend. She eventually spread this rumor that got multiple people in her town coming out and talking about how he was actually a raging homophobe and should not be teaching kids to be in his homophobic youth group. The next thing she knew, he was fired and banned from teaching kids, because I guess he was also a bit weird with kids anyways. But this is what I mean. That none of that was just from one guy posting something, trying to be impressive on the internet, which I understand is not the main thing that people tend to do on social media in terms of activism, but it is something that you do see people doing. And this was not just some one alienating singular post to call action to some local issue to show that you care and have empathy. It was real and in front of everyone. It led to more thorough searches on who is teaching the youth in her area and pushed for redrawing of her district's education system. And that was just from one kid's speech. Another example of odd child activism, which, I'm sorry about this, is not actually child online activism, I kind of ran out of ideas, is back when I was in elementary school, my school used to put on plays for Black History Month, you know, and other big events to commemorate people and their accomplishments. They were also open to the rest of my city. So during Black History Month, we were learning about Rosa Parks, and this was in a time when racial police violence was on the rise. So activism about racial justice was a big topic. So what did my school do? We put on a play about Rosa Parks and how she stood up for racial equality and how we shouldn't stop that rhetoric just because we think the fight is over. And do you want to know who had the lovely privilege of playing Rosa Parks? Me. That's who. A white girl who went to a predominantly Hispanic and African American school who just happened to have a slightly interesting hair texture. So call me Kendall from Dance Moms, if you know what I'm talking about. But you know what? Looking back on it, it was super weird and problematic that I was playing Rosa Parks, so I am incredibly sorry. Though we all got informed on the history of racial violence during the civil rights movement and encouraged the masses to stand up and fight for the current injustices today. But seriously, whose idea was that? And to keep me from getting canceled, I would like to mention that I did not choose the role of Rosa Parks. But in conclusion, it's about time we stop sitting in our little bubble baths, sipping organically produced wine, posting our little informational blurbs on the internet, and pull up our pants, get outside, hoist the pitchforks, and take to the streets for social change. Because if the internet won't be consistent with activism, we certainly can. So go out and join this protest for social equality and civil rights today.
I'd like to thank Jane for their very kind speech and call on Beacon to continue the case for side opposition. Hear, hear.
I thought I'd skip over my joke about you all spending your Halloween in the GNB. I feel like our first speaker already addressed that. Here we go. Today we are debating the rise of online activism. Online activism involves the use of electronic communication technologies such as social media, email, and podcasts for various forms of activism to enable faster and more effective communication by citizen movements. While volunteering at Phil Speaks 2 weeks ago, I did have the fortune or misfortune opportunity of a lifetime, based on your inclinations, to be a judge and witness our very own Jack Palmer, the infamous schools debater and European Championship debater, chair a BP debate. Between being inundated with BP debating buzzwords and trying to distinguish who Prime Minister and whatever the other ones were called, I did take one thing away: the importance of impact in a speech. So instead of my usual rambling and provocative tangents, I will try to attempt to channel my inner BP schoolie for you all and provide impact. Online activism has changed the world as we know it. It has changed the landscape of politics, entertainment, businesses, and all aspects of life. It has brought attention to the sexual abuse in professional settings with the Me Too movement highlighting the disgusting experience women face in TV and film industries, allowing them to share their stories and be supported by a network of women with too many similar stories. I'm also 6'3", brown eyes, and gig the U.S. citizenship. No, but seriously, online activism has provided a platform to highlight racial injustices and police brutality for people to share the stories of Trayvon Martin, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, and the many other awful cases of young African-American individuals who were killed by the very people sworn to protect them. The means of online activism has made us all aware of the prejudice, violence, and profiling from abusive police officers on black people and the oppression they face each and every day. Online activism has charged a generation of my peers to make real changes in responses to the too many lives lost in school shootings through the March for Our Lives movement. Online activism has given the likes of Greta Thunberg a platform to speak out for our own planet and the danger we face in the climate crisis. The list goes on. Millions have been brought out of school and work for countless causes to show the power of collective action when mobilized by the measures of online activism. Online activism has dismantled the corrupt, toxic, and abusive establishment prevalent in many industries and fields. It has given a voice to the Davids of the David and Goliath battles, a voice to the underdog, the disenfranchised, changing the world. The proposition may make arguments critiquing the extreme ends of online activism which may encompass a toxic and woke cancel culture. However, this is a minority in the grand scheme of those engaging with the internet each and every day. They may even make the argument we are better off without online activism. However, this would lead us all to be the problematic aunt or uncle who without fail ruins Christmas dinner year in and year out, with the egregious one-liners offending any and everyone in the group. I've even decided to provide some examples, my personal favorites heard at my family's dinner table over the years. Wow, you've really filled out. Oh please, you don't really believe the government isn't lying to us? They do, they're all in on it. Open your eyes. Are you still seeing that therapist? I mean, if it helps, you sleep at night. I just never understood needing all that. This would be the result of a society where we are not engaging with online activism and learning to be a more socially and culturally aware society. A vote for the proposition is a disregard for the valuable change that has been brought about through the means of online activism. A vote for the proposition is a vote in favor for the corrupt establishment, a vote against the youth, the activists, and the people who change the world for the better. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Ethan for his very kind speech and call on Dick Robbins to close the debate for the side opposite or proposition. Hear, hear.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to speak before this very venerable debating society. I'm speaking in favour of the motion that this House deplores the rise in digital activism. And it's fitting that we're here in an historic venue because I want to talk a little bit about history. And it's fitting that you're all members of a philosophical society because I want to talk a little bit about philosophy as well. And it's good that it's me speaking because I want to talk about myself a bit too. So, first to the history. So, digital media, I suppose, goes back to the 90s when the first websites and blogs appeared, way before your time, but I was quite excited to see them come along. You could read them, you could search them, but you couldn't interact with them. In the late 90s, early 2000s, the second wave of online innovation arrived, Web 2.0, which prioritized user generation and interaction. So users became creators, producers, and influencers, and Jay Rosen said in 2006 that the media space had been taken over by, quotes, the people formerly known as the audience. So Web 2.0 was seen as a democratic revolution. Gone were the stuffy gatekeepers of journalism. Everyone could be a journalist now. And then with the arrival of Facebook in 2004 and YouTube in 2005, we saw the rise of the prosumer, somebody who consumes and produces media content. And then fast forward a little bit to social movements such as the Arab Spring of 2010, the Maidan Revolution in Ukraine in 2014, and the Umbrella Movement in Hong Kong in 2014 as well. We saw them use social media to mobilize millions of people. And it looked like the utopian democratizing promise of digital media had been realized. But like all utopias, when you look a little closer, it's not that straightforward. First, across all these social movements and political movements, subsequent research has shown that the social media platforms were used mostly for coordination for those who were already committed to the protest cause, as tools for recruitment and coalition building, which are important parts of any social movement. They were practically useless. Also, the digital aspect of activism is extremely vulnerable to control and manipulation by the very people the protests are aimed at. So when Egypt turned off the internet, the Arab Spring wilted. And in the other protests I mentioned, the digital space became flooded with counter-propaganda and disinformation by the governments under attack. So the real power of these movements lay in old-fashioned, boots-on-the-ground activism. It lay in the hundreds of thousands of people who filled Maidan Square in Kyiv, or the streets of Hong Kong, or Tahrir Square in Cairo. Yes, digital activism helped organize logistics and increase the visibility of the protests. But to bring about change, you need marches, protests, lobbying, and voting. So, the history of digital activism shows that it's useful in some respects, but it cannot replace the physical, real-world activism of marches, protests, sit-ins and occupations that have been the means of social change ever since the civil rights movement in the US and the anti-Vietnam War protests in the US in the 1960s. So much for the historical aspect. Let me now move on to the philosophical, or at least theoretical, ways to think about digital activism. Gatekeeper theory states that journalists and editors act as gatekeepers, deciding on what information we all see. The arrival of digital media 20 years ago took away, or at least diluted, the gatekeeping power of the news media. But an unintended... yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, on your discussion of propaganda, the propagandizing by governments and the cracking down on dissidents is nothing new, but at least isn't there less of a power dynamic if you're able to use a more democratized approach in the internet, where people who have less money to resist physical approaches and reproaches and propaganda can basically fight against them?
I think that when your activism takes place only online, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the limitations of that, then it is very vulnerable to being delegitimized or even shut down by elites. Sorry, just to come back to some of the philosophical and theoretical approaches I was talking about. So we had a gatekeeping media. The arrival of social media diluted or did away with that. But it had an unintended consequence in that we lost a grip on a shared set of facts and circumstances. Professional trained journalists whose work is based on verified information were delegitimized and opinions became more important than facts. I promised my daughter I'd bring in a quote from Lord of the Rings here. So as the Lady Galadriel said, some things that should not have been forgotten were lost. I'll tell her that one down very well. So we are all familiar with the concepts of filter bubbles, echo chambers, and rabbit holes. They're all contributory factors to what I think is an alarming and serious consequence of the rise of digital activism, the absence of an agreed reality. In fact, during George W. Bush's presidency, one of his administration officials, Karl Rove, told journalist Russ Suskind that guys like him, Suskind, belong to the reality-based community, and that the Bush presidency was creating its own reality. The reality-based community base their judgments on facts and formulate policy from evidence and science. The alternative, which we saw in the Bush and Trump presidencies, is to base policy on vibes, trending hashtags, or feelings such as anger, revenge, resentment, or a desire to divide. If your activism takes place only on social media, then you are forced to conform and accept what academics call media logics. Media logic refers to the assumptions and processes for constructing messages on a particular medium. So your protest or activism has to be photogenic for Instagram, short and funny for TikTok, aggressive and pithy for Twitter, conspiratorial for YouTube, and feature old people for Facebook. The concept of media logic has a close cousin called mediatization. This is the idea that interacting with the media can change organizations, movements, and even governments. After a while, how something will play with the media begins to become a central concern. So organizations, movements start to use visuals and sound bites with the idea that this will go viral or will be picked up by the media, and it's often at the expense of nuance or even sometimes truth. So when you look at digital activism through these theoretical approaches of the dilution of reality, media logics, and mediatization, I think you can see that relying on the digital alone can distort and corrupt social movements. Okay, I said I was going to talk about history, philosophy, and myself, so we're now entering to the me part of my argument. On the 8th of May this year, I was playing cricket about 200 yards. Which way is the cricket? That way. From where we are now. I'm the captain of an ageing and decrepit cricket team of ex-journalists called the Herald Taverners. And we were playing against a team of slightly less aged actors and thespians called the Theatrical Cavaliers. Among the Herald ranks, we have a player called Ian Kilroy, who is a former journalist, lecturer, and a Buddhist priest. And before the game, Ian contacted me. Was it not strange, he said, that we will be cavorting around College Park in our cricket whites when so many people were dying in Gaza and Israel, and a stone's throw away from where we're having the game, Trinity students were camping out in protest. We need to mark this and acknowledge this strange kind of incongruity. So both teams lined up at the wicket. Ian said a few words about peace and respect and how the values of sport in general and cricket in particular could make us better versions of ourselves. We took photos, we posted them to our team WhatsApp group and on social media. And just as we were noticing all the heart and thumbs up emojis on our posts, we noticed something happening. On the path between the cricket pitch and the rugby pitch, a troop of students were walking past, carrying tents and sleeping bags. The Trinity protests had been resolved after the university had caved in to student demands. Now I ask you, would Trinity have agreed to support the International Court of Justice stance on incitement to genocide? Would Trinity have agreed to divest from companies based in the occupied territories? Would they have agreed to support Palestinian scholars? Would they have set up a task force without these protests? Would clicks and likes and shares have brought this university to its knees? No. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Dr. Robbins for a very kind speech and call on the views to close the debate as a whole. Hear, hear.
Howdy. You know, COVID-19 changed a lot of things. But for me, one of those things was the way I acted online. And just to be clear, this isn't going to be one of those things where I'm like, and then I started using Reddit. Nothing like that. In fact, quite the opposite happened. I had too much of being online and I became totally uncontactable, which has lasted to this day, as I'm sure Annika can confirm. I was just totally sick of being online, so goodbye speedy answers, goodbye to my 1,000-day snap streaks. It was around this time that I changed my bio on Instagram to replies take 3 to 5 business days, and I thought that was really funny until someone slid into my DMs and they were like, like just checking if this is true. Well, let's just say they're still waiting. But the point of this is, I'm not some whole great fan of the whole interweb thing. In fact, I think I'd probably rather a world where rich people don't get to tip the balance in favour of American autocracy at their whim using the social media platform they purchased, and where I don't have to see every second reel about how great I'd look with a rhinoplasty on the regular. But you know what? For better or worse, the online world does exist, and I would say the vast majority of people are in some way connected to it. But the question tonight, therefore, it's not whether we regret the existence of all the shite parts of the internet, the disinformation, which is a legitimate concern, but which is also what the proposition have been talking about, and which isn't something that is limited to or caused by online activism. In fact, I think it's a tiny bit unfair to say that misinformation is kind of the sole fault of online activism, because it's just not really, it's just not really a unique consequence of online activism, but rather of an unregulated internet landscape. And furthermore, the proposition admit that online activism is useful in some respects. But the crucial thing that I want you all to remember is no one on our side is saying that online activism has replaced physical activism. In fact, what we have argued is that they work very well in tandem with each other. And unless there had been some demonstrable evidence on the proposition side that online activism had in some way replaced or decimated physical activism, maybe that would be a legitimate consideration. But all evidence shows that it hasn't, and it has in fact empowered a much wider variety of people to become involved in activism.
All of the case coming from your side of the table relies on good activism, as you call it, which is entirely what you call leftist activism. The rise of the far right and the spread of disinformation is still activism in itself, even if you do not agree with it, and it fits within the remit of online activism. How do you respond?
I have lots to say about that. I don't think it's really fair or proportionate to claim that the rise of the far right is online activism, because I know that the far right purport to have certain demands in line with, I guess, the definition of activism, which is to campaign for social change. But I would argue that inciting hatred and violence and a general call to get rid of a certain demographic isn't really campaigning or seeking anything. I would argue it's simply a campaign of intimidation, and I wouldn't think that this is genuinely synonymous with activism. Moreover, in a world where we would have the same unregulated internet landscape, but a dearth of online activism, I don't think that we would magically be free of the fascist forces that use social media to organise. So I really hope that answers your question. Whew. But the question tonight is, we're talking about a specific consequence of the internet existing, online activism, and we're asking whether we regret this specific consequence and whether we would rather a world where online activism hadn't really risen to become a thing. And to be honest, I have to say, out of all the genuinely heinous things that have come out of the internet, like LinkedIn, like Elon Musk, and like those people on Tinder who say, you can bait the wife, but you cannot bait the crack. It honestly doesn't make much sense to me that we are vilifying online activism, because a lot of good and a lot of positive consequences have come out of it, and crucially, it's enabled a wider faction of society to become safely involved in activism and to have their voices heard, which I don't think is something that's been adequately addressed. In fact, I think what has been missing in this debate is the recognition of what online activism has actually achieved, because I fear that when we are thinking about it, we are only thinking of it in a negative context or considering the more performative and less impactful kinds, like reposting a black square. But for the record, while the black square thing was genuinely quite useless as regards advancing the cause of racial equality, the fact that we are still talking about it 4 years later shows at least the capability of online activism to shape culture, which is something that the proposition did not concede. But online activism can achieve tangible change, as my colleagues on the opposition have shown. It can be big things, like the Arab Spring, a huge series of pro-democracy protests which are largely thought to have been mobilised online and did affect tangible change, or the Me Too movement, which can be credited with an enormous cultural and worldwide shift and shouldn't be ignored. It can achieve even bigger and more important things than democracy and justice, like the online campaign in 2020 to have the Leaving Cert cancelled. And for the record, this is not a campaign I supported, and it was at this moment I questioned democracy. But the point is, there are many positive consequences that we should feel thankful for. And should we be regretting the consequences of these campaigns? Should we be wishing for a world where these things hadn't happened? No. Performative activism is not synonymous with online activism, and moreover isn't a unique consequence of being online. So when we talk about people who are just kind of doing useless stuff, I will have to say, people have always been lazy, and they've always pretended to be informed about things when they're not. So in a world without online activism, I'm not sure that there'd just be like less overall activism. I think that these people would probably still just be lazy, they'd just be doing fuck all. But if we hadn't had a rise of online activism, there'd probably be less representative and effective activism, and here's why. Point number 2, as Andy alluded to, the rise of online activism has enabled a much, much wider variety of people to be heard than were previously. And I know we already did have a bit of yapping about this, but bear with me. Online activism is more accessible. And it is more accessible than traditional kinds. But seriously, think about it. It's more accessible for everyone, and that's the individual with mobility issues who is physically unable to march. It's the primary care provider who has to look after the children and cannot safely bring them around knocking on doors. It's the person who cannot financially afford to take a day off work to go to a march, or the immunocompromised for whom it is dangerous to be physically among people. And regarding online connection, most people don't get involved in activism to make some new friends. I certainly would not. Like, people who are activists or self-described activists can actually be quite annoying, I find. I also think it's probably wishful thinking to deny, though, that people can make connections online. Anyone on Hinge? No. But the rise... Not me, friends, not me. The rise of online activism, and this is something we haven't heard anything about at all, it's enabled a safer way of protesting and being heard. Online platforms have allowed those living in hostile and undemocratic regimes to mobilise and advocate for change in a way that is safer than campaigning in the street. And while I acknowledge there are forces who do purport to corrupt them, equally there are counter forces such as, that Telegram app. I mean, I know they're trying to arrest the guy who invented that, but for those who don't know, it's a kind of another totally unregulated social media app that has been used for corruption. But the point is, social media will never be truly controllable, and it will never be truly corrupted in that sense. But I do think that the benefit of protesting somewhat anonymously or protesting in a way where you can't be identified by your government is something that cannot be understated, when even near neighbours like the United Kingdom have begun to imprison people who have physically protested against climate change, when pro-Palestinian demonstrators are consistently harassed by the police in Germany, where there's a huge amount of evidence to suggest that ethnic minorities involved in protests tend to be treated much more harshly. When the right to demonstrate peacefully seems to be under attack, how can the opposition stand up here and regret something that is bolstering people's right to be heard? And you know what? Another thing. The rise of online activism has arguably given rise to slightly more effective lines of campaigning. And again, while I do acknowledge that this cannot come without the benefits of physical campaigning as well, now we do have direct access to the vast majority of decision makers in government. And while there are those who abuse this privilege, it is still quite something to be able to directly petition the leader of your country via a simple email or a simple hate-filled DM, I guess. But listen. If we regret the rise of online activism, not only do we regret the positive things that it has achieved, we regret the enhanced and expanded ability to be an activist in the first place. We regret that activism is no longer largely confined to the able-bodied. We regret that online activism is providing a haven in a world where the right to demonstrate and protest is under attack. The rise of online activism hasn't decimated in-person activism. They work in tandem together and help each other. So I regret that. Now I have to say, And I would really like to emphasize this. Most of the most annoying people I've ever met were self-described activists. And I say most because I studied law in this college. But you know what? These people would be annoying no matter what. This was not the fault of online activism. I cannot regret online activism. I cannot regret its expanded impact. I cannot regret its accessibility. And I cannot regret what it has achieved. So, ladies and gentlemen, Arwini Ushla, you only live once, so live without regrets. Don't regret online activism.
I'd like to thank Louise for her very fine speech and thank all speakers for a great debate. Hear, hear. Before we vote, just a reminder to fill out your oratory returns and we will be taking them just at the door when we leave. And then also a reminder that there are Halloween drinks happening over there just after us, so feel free to join. Okay, we're going to start the vote. So all those in favor of regretting online activism? Aye. All those against regretting online activism? Nay. I think the motion falls. The motion falls. Thank you.